Greetings everyone and welcome back to 365 Days of Prog. Today we're going to be reviewing the 7th house by the band IQ.
Hi, my name's Naomi. I'm an avid progressive rock fan, but I'm a long ways from knowing all the prog albums out there. But this year, I'm gonna give it a try. This is 365 Days of Prog.
You know, it's a pretty smart choice to call your band IQ. Anyway, here's some of my favorite bits from this album. So, you know, somewhere out there in the metacosmic universe, there probably is a parallel reality to ours in which progressive rock was thriving in the early 70s and then it kind of started dwindling out in the late 70s and just never came back again and basically remaining a relic of the past. But luckily we are not living in that reality because after the slight dwindling of prog in the 70s, although it didn't reach to the top as it was in the early 70s as well, it kind of got a reemergence in the 80s amongst pop music and punk music. There were several bands who were courageous enough to go ahead and produce really good progressive rock music, bands such as Marillion, Jadis, and of course the one we are talking about today, IQ. So IQ formed back in 1981 from the ashes of another band called The Lens. And this band's early lineup proved to be one of the most faithful and most devout lineups of people that ever existed in a prog rock group, because seeing their lineup on their debut album and on their last album coming out in 2019, they are both astoundingly similar. And IQ started creating their own music with the purpose of proving to everyone that progressive rock was still more relevant as ever, and despite it not being the most contemporary thing and a lot of the great 70s bands like King Crimson and Yes moving on to create some more poppier types of albums and songs, these guys stuck to their truth and did a lot like Marillion, kind of copy Genesis in some way, although way less than what Marillion did. And the album that we're reviewing today is called The 7th House. Now I don't know why I have an issue with saying this name, with actually vocalizing it. I just kind of get it mixed up. It's like a tongue twister for me, so I'm gonna try and avoid saying it for the rest of this album as much as I can. And this album came out in the thriving year of 2000. Now I don't know, but it seems like we haven't reviewed a lot of albums from that year in particular. It seemed that a lot of things happened in the 90s, a lot of things happened in 2001 and onwards, but the 2000th year just kinda is a lackluster when it comes to prog. Now the 7th house happens to be the band's 8th album. Now I don't know what about you, but that just kind of bugged me. I really wish it was their 7th album or they've just called it the 8th house. I don't really care, I just hate when it doesn't line up. Now as it seems, IQ are just like wine. Some people hate their taste and want to lock them up in a cellar, but a lot of people see them as a band that gets progressively better as time goes by, and you can definitely see this with their 2014 album called The Road of Bones, which is considered by many to be their magnum opus. Now the 7th house is a very interesting album to me personally because it is still basically neo-prog, which is usually not my cup of prog, but I will have to admit that it is way better than the piles of garbage we see in this specific subgenre today. But another thing which I really can't help is the fact that when I listened to this album once and even twice, I found that it actually swelled some really deep feelings of happiness within me, and I don't know why that is, but it has to do something with the music and the band, of course. Songs Songs like The Wrong Side of Weird or the Seventh House title track or even 0 Hour are just very moving songs which I really love, and honestly I do believe that if I saw them being performed live I would have enjoyed them even better. Now by this point I've seen multiple people saying that the intrinsic captivation of IQ's music has a lot to do with their vocalist called Peter Nichols. I know that he has a great stage presence and a lot of people love him for it, and as someone who attended a progressive rock concert lately, I can easily say that stage presence is a lot of the game. You can actually have some really good music, but if you're stale on stage and you don't do interesting things and you don't interact with your audience, you're basically worth almost nothing, of course, unless you are very well known, and people don't need that in order to be impressed by what you do. But with the case of these guys, I do believe that this livelihood and presence somewhat features as well in the recorded music, and I don't know how to explain this. There was just something that was really intrinsically personal with this type of music, but as well as being, of course, progressive. And this kind of album isn't your typical, let's say, Gentle Giant album where there's so much variation going into each section of their music that it's just mind-blowing. This takes the approach of being, light-hearted prog, if I might say, where every 1 or 2 bars or even 4 bars, you see any change of pace, mood, or whatever in the songs. And you know what? I'm fine with this. I'm genuinely fine with this. I don't think that it's my definite cup of prog, but it's definitely something that I want to come back to. And all in all, when I look back at this album, I do believe that it has some really 3 good tracks on it, and 3 tracks which are lesser, let's say it like that. They're not bad, but they're just not as good. And all in all, I do believe that it makes for an average plus album at least. And if you're watching this and you're an IQ fan and you want to know if I'm gonna review more of them, then I'll let you know right now that we have 2 more albums on the list just waiting to be reviewed. Of course, these 2 albums are Ever and Frequency. Now I know I'm not gonna listen to The Road of Bones this year, and I'm kind of sad for it because I really wanted to get to it, but nobody recommended it, so it didn't get on the list, I guess. So yeah, that's about it. Let's move on to talking about the cover. Honestly, I'm not the biggest fan of this cover. Like, I know that it looks good and it pops out, but it just looks very low effort to me. And there's this sort of low effort covers that you're just kind of going, oh yeah, they're supposed to be low effort, but this one looks like it was trying to be something very special, but I'm not really impressed by what I see on here. Of course, what we do see on here is some sort of a kaleidoscopic septagon with the 7 sides, of course, hindering back to the 7th house and the motive that it has. And I don't know what it's supposed to represent, but it looks to me like some sort of a mix between an angel and a butterfly, and a very exotic one at that. I don't really know what this is supposed to mean, but yeah, that's basically all I've got. So personally, I do believe that this album has 3 tracks that are an 8 out of 10, and then it has 3 tracks which I would mostly rate as 6 out of 10s. So when you come to an average, you'd see that the final rating for this album would be a very respectable 7 out of 10. But that's about it, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for tomorrow because we're going to be listening to the first album that all of you actually recommended for me to listen on this list. Of course, we did the poll like a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago. So yeah, it's of course going to be Grave New World by the band Straubs. I of course want to thank my lovely supporters over on Patreon, so thank you so much to Clay Wan, Wrist of Kings, and Lindsay. Hey Cox, you guys are the best, and if any of you want to support me over on Patreon, you can find the link down in the description or in my about page. But that's about it, guys. Have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Bye guys.